With all the stigma surrounding Metal Gear Survive, there are many out there who are curious to see how well or how poorly the game will go on to sell, and based on initial reports, things aren't looking good so far. In the UK, as far as physical copies go, the game ranked 6th overall during its launch week, which may not sound all that bad until you consider that it's a game carrying the Metal Gear name, whose only competition during launch week was titles that have been released for weeks, if not months. For more context, compared to other entries in the series, the game only sold 15% of Revengeance's debut numbers and barely 5% of Phantom Pain's debut numbers. On Steam, the latest charts show that the game's peak number of concurrent players has only reached 5,500 since its February 20th, 2018 launch date. By comparison, Phantom Pain peaked at 90,000 players, and even Revengeance performed twice as well as Survive did on PC with almost 12,000 peak concurrent players. Then there is physical sales in Japan. According to website 4Gamer, Metal Gear Survive ranked 3rd during its launch week, which again may not sound that bad until you consider that it's a Metal Gear game competing against titles like Senran Kagura Burst Renewal, Girls und Panzer, and Monster Hunter World's 4th week of sales. Furthermore, Japan's physical sales charts show that Survive only sold a mere 31,000 physical copies during launch week, which is dismal when you consider that Phantom Pain debuted at over 400,000 copies and Revengeance at over 300,000 copies. Now here's where things get interesting. It has recently come to my attention that when it comes to digital sales in Japan, Metal Gear Survive topped the list, even overcoming Monster Hunter World's 4th week of digital sales. I can understand how at a glance this may seem as though Survive is actually selling really well, but I'd like to offer my thoughts on why this is the wrong way of looking at this data. So the first important thing to note is that whereas in the US, digital game sales tend to do better than physical game sales, in Japan it's still the other way around. As an example, when Monster Hunter World launched in Japan, in its first 3 days, the game was reported to have sold 1.35 million physical copies and around 650,000 digital copies, meaning that physical outsold digital by a ratio of around 2-to-1. If we assume a similar ratio for Metal Gear Survive with some room for deviation, keeping in mind that the game pushed 31,000 physical copies, it's probably a safe bet that the game sold in the ballpark of 15 to 20,000 digital copies. Let's be generous and assume 20,000. So all that Japan's PlayStation Store charts indicate is that when it comes to digital sales, Monster Hunter World sold a little less than that amount. Long story short, yes, Metal Gear Survive topped PlayStation's digital sales charts during its launch week, but looking at the game's dismal physical sales, and considering that digital versions of games in Japan tend to perform half as well, it's safe to say that the game won't be crushing any sales records anytime soon. It's also worth noting that if you look at Japan's PlayStation digital sales charts for Metal Gear Survive's second week, you can see that the game has already slipped into 3rd place, with games like Monster Hunter World and Nier Automata, the former over a month old and the latter around a year old, still retaining interest from Japanese gamers. While we're at it, let's take a look at how the game's PlayStation digital sales are performing in other regions. Here's what the PlayStation Store's top sellers chart looks like for the UK. As you can see, in its second week, Metal Gear Survive is already all the way down here in 32nd place. Then, if we check out the list of top games in the American PlayStation Store, you can see that Metal Gear Survive has already slipped to 52nd place in its second week. How successful a game is can normally be defined by its ability to remain in top charts and sell well continuously over a long period of time, but not even 2 weeks in and Metal Gear Survive is already very quickly slipping off sales charts, which is pretty telling of how little interest it has garnered from Metal Gear fans and the gaming community as a whole. Now, that's not to say that Metal Gear Survive is the worst selling game ever or anything like that. There have certainly been games that have sold much worse. My expectation is that based on the figures I've seen, over its lifetime, Metal Gear Survive will probably go on to sell over 100,000 units maybe, which could be much worse all things considered. But at the same time, Metal Gear Survive isn't just any game. It's a game bearing the Metal Gear name, and that name comes with certain expectations when it comes to game quality, artistic merits, and gamer interest. By Metal Gear standards, Survive certainly isn't up there in terms of quality. It has no soul on an artistic level, and it has certainly failed to garner interest on the level that other entries in the series have. Hell, the only reason that this game's been getting any amount of attention is because it bears the Metal Gear name and because it follows up on the drama surrounding Kojima and Konami. That is the only reason that some people are giving this game a glance, and Konami knows this too. I can guarantee you that making Survive a Metal Gear game wasn't an artistic decision, it was a business one, just like when they shoehorned Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater into pachinkos. I like to think of Metal Gear Survive as the alien from Men in Black that possessed the farmer Edgar, who was played by Vincent D'Onofrio. It's this ugly, otherworldly thing that's wearing Edgar's hollowed out flesh as a disguise, but despite the alien's best attempt to blend in, it doesn't take much to see that something's just very, very off about this guy. Similarly, Metal Gear Survive is this ugly, bizarre thing that's wearing Metal Gear's husk as a disguise to pass itself off as a Metal Gear game, but looking at it is just very off-putting for a number of reasons. The game's certainly off-putting enough that the majority of the gaming community is staying as far away from this abomination as possible. Sure, the Metal Gear name might have given Survive enough legs to sell a few copies at launch, but in the long run, this is a game that will be long mocked and eventually forgotten. And say what you want about the Metal Gear series, but one thing a proper Metal Gear game isn't is forgettable. That's just one man's perspective anyway. I'd love to hear what you think about all this in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon. It is completely optional, but donating even as little as $1 a month will go a long way in helping this channel grow. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.